The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, among his own kin, and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I have always struggled with what to say, and behind that, what to think, or even what to feel about the virgin martyrs of the first few centuries. So, in some way or other, I put that in the hands of the Lord, because so often we can't get to the reality of the person behind the image of these virgin martyrs, with very few exceptions like Perpetua and Felicity, whose acts are relatively authentic. But for the most part, what we know is medieval legends that grew up around all kinds of strange sorts of piety. And even worse with Saint Agatha, because the legendary circumstances of her death just gave rise to an awful lot of, let's say, the license of artists to dance around some kind of holy porn. And I don't really need to go into too much detail about that. Thank you, Lord. But what we do seem to know about her would indicate that maybe she is, Agatha, maybe she is, probably along with Josephine Bakhita, whom we celebrate in 3 days, an important patron for our times, because it's pretty clear that the heart of her torments basically had to do with sexual mutilation and the kind of stuff that we are continually striving to deal with even today. And without going into all of the details, but I think one of the things is kind of clear that you probably did not have torture in those days without rape. And, virginity was maintained in the intention, but the physicality of it was, it simply could not have happened otherwise. That is human nature. So, if we kind of let ourselves be guided by that thought, maybe St. Agatha is a patron for our times today. Maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to what enduring that kind of abuse, that kind of violation actually does say to us in our world and how we address our world today. One thought came to me, and I have to say that this morning, quite frankly, I was dealing with a flood of thoughts that could perhaps be It might be an interesting seminar to put on with, kind of discussions as to coming from all different directions. But the one thought is the only tool that our society seems to have against sexual abuse is consent. If there's consent, it's okay no matter what. If there's not consent, it's wrong no matter what. And that's probably important as far as it goes. But we, in our tradition, do have the tools to go deeper, recovering something that so much of our society has lost, and that is the intimate connection between sexuality and life, and the reverence for life needing to be manifested primarily, well, maybe not primarily, but in some foundational way in the reverence for sexuality. And then going on to discover ways of talking about, discover ways of communicating those particular values in a way that our world today can hear. Because I do think, there is a deepening reverence for life in our world today, but that tends to be circumscribed by all kinds of other values. How we see this right or that right, or how we as individuals are impacted by it, and what is convenient, what is perhaps challenging. All of those things, life sometimes seems to be, life itself seems to be subordinated to those other conditions. How can we credibly get back into that conversation? And of course, the church does have its own way of shooting itself in the foot, because that particular area of sexuality is one that we have not really dealt with as far as the organization and the constitution of the church in a very real way. We've got to pull the whole church back into practicing what we preach, and then preaching what we practice. So if St. Agatha can be a patron here, she's got a lot of work cut out for her. So let's pray.
We should have had him on Sunday in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I read a very interesting piece by actually a middle-aged professional sex worker, just reflecting on how horrific that show by J.Lo was in degrading people of her profession. I'll try to find that and send. I'll send that to you.
That's all for you.
Because it was a very, very interesting point of view. I think it was on HuffPost.
Wow.
So.
Okay. Interesting.
So we got a lot to think about and pray for. I think let's do our prayer of the faithful in silence, because so many of the things are just swimming around our minds and our hearts, and we can either get very superficial about it, or we can go on and on and on and on. We do have Sister Angela to remember. And for everything in our hearts and our lives, that the Lord may discover ways to touch us and use us as instruments to touch our world. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.